Welcome to the Parenting High Needs Children YouTube channel. Today I am welcoming Afsaneh Moradian, and I can't wait to have this discussion with her. I am so excited. She is a longtime educator, children's author, curriculum writer, and founder of MLC Homeschool Coaching. She has taught hundreds of students from age 3 to 68, and she now works with parents who struggle with homeschooling their neurodivergent children. She enjoys homeschooling her own unique child. And this is something that has really resonated with me in the last several months, maybe even year, as I kind of am struggling myself to make a decision on how I'm going to homeschool my own high needs child. And I think this is something that a lot of parents either have to come to terms with or are maybe even struggling with themselves. So, Afsaneh, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do? And then we'll dive in a little deeper.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to get to share this with your audience and speak to you today. A lot of families are choosing to homeschool now because the traditional school environment just isn't working for their kids. And there's just been such a major shift in schooling over the past couple of decades towards standardized testing, right? That high stakes testing, where so much of the school year is around mastering skills and being able to score well on the tests. And that doesn't work for kids who need a different type of learning and a different type of education. And so a lot of kids then become a problem in the classroom and they're not going to get their needs met. So a lot of parents have seen homeschooling as the best option to give their kids an education where they can thrive. That being said, I think a lot of our idea about what schooling and learning is then becomes, okay, create a learning space in your house and buy a curriculum, and then your child will do that every day, and that will be homeschooling, and that will be school at home. And that doesn't really work for neurodivergent, high needs, unique, strong-willed kids, however you want to, however you describe your child. Doesn't really work for them because they need learning that they find meaningful and that they can connect to. So parents then find themselves in a situation where their child is refusing to do an assignment or resisting in one way or another, and maybe there are power struggles, and the parents feel like their job is to get their kids to learn, and learning means follow the curriculum, and if their child isn't doing that math assignment, then they're not learning math and they're falling behind. And so there's this snowball effect on the parent of the stress, the worry, the frustration, the desperation, then the feelings of I'm failing my child is falling behind, they're not learning, all the anxiety. And it's just not a really good place to be when you're still homeschooling your kid every single day. So that's where I come in. That's usually when parents come to me because what they're doing isn't getting a great result. Their child isn't engaged in their learning. They're not thriving. The parent's not thriving. It's all becoming a bit, stressful and a struggle. And then I intervene to help them, have a different framework, a different approach, a different way of homeschooling their unique child. So that's what I do.
That's fantastic. I I think everything you said there is pretty much where I'm coming from. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent that feels that way either, because I really don't know anything about homeschooling. And I have two children and there's a big age gap. And I really didn't consider homeschooling with my older one, except for that space after COVID. And we tried an online program with her, and it was not a good, it was bad. And she stayed home for I think a month, and we ended up sending her back to public school because this program was not serving her at all, which was very unfortunate. But now I have a 4-year-old who we do have another year of preschool, but then we have to come to that decision. And she's the higher needs of the two. They both have high needs, but the little one is more so. And this is where what do I do? What does she need? And I have bigger concerns about what she's going to be able to tolerate. And I'm not sure that a 7+ hour structured school day is really going to be it. But then at the same time, I'm like, I don't know if I can handle that. There's no way I'm going to get her sit down for however many school hours at home. And then I send her to preschool now because I need a break. What do I do? And am I capable of homeschooling? Like, I'm not a teacher. All of there's a million questions. And I think it's really exciting that there is someone out there doing what you do, because I always thought people just winged it. I don't know. Like, I was always like, how do you even figure this out? Like, I don't know anything about teaching. Um, so I'm really excited that you're offering this option and that you do support parents, because I had no idea how to even approach this topic. And now I'm like, oh, is this what we're gonna need? Or and I'm like, I'm in this toss up where how do I decide? You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I think you have to have a clear vision of what homeschooling could look like. And it's not school at home. It's not 7 hours. It's not with a 5, 6 year old. It's like an hour. It might not even get to an hour each day, because so much of the school day in a traditional school is transitions. If you think about how much time is actually spent learning, yeah, it's a few hours, but it's also line up, we're going to recess, line up, we're going to gym, line up, we're going to lunch, line up. There's a lot of things that happen during that 6, 7 hour time. Homeschooling is not school as you experienced it at home. It can't, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It is the opposite. It's taking learning and making it hyper customized, hyper individualized to the person that you're working with, your kids, your child, your kids, right? They are unique individuals. They learn their own way. They process information in their own way. They experience the world in their own way. And so you're educating them. The thing about it is, teachers don't know everything. I was a classroom teacher for many years. You don't have to think, oh, do I know enough to teach my child? No, because you're facilitating their learning. You don't have to be the expert. And we're creating lifelong learners who are problem solvers. So the best thing for a teacher or a parent to say is, I don't know. Let's find out. I don't know. Let's look that up. I don't know. I'm not good at art. Let's try this thing together. Or you don't want to say I'm not good, actually. I take that back, because everyone's learning. So you don't start out good at anything, right? So you could say, oh, I'm not sure how to draw that thing, but here's a video that shows us how. Why don't we try together? And you're learning alongside your child. You're not the authority. That whole authority figure telling the class what to do, it doesn't apply to homeschooling. And that's a big reason why there's a lot of struggles and a lot of challenges in the beginning, because parents think, oh, okay, I'm the teacher. I'm going to say, here's what we're doing for math, and my child will do it. And then your child doesn't do it. And then you say, well, come on, you can do it. Get it done, and we'll do something fun. And they can't do it. And they say, well, if you don't do it, you're going to lose screen time or whatever. And then they explode because they can't do it. So it really doesn't work when it's a replica of your schooling, the educational experience you had. When you try to do that at home with unique kids, it really doesn't go very well. So you have to remember, there's more than one way to learn something. There's no one way. I have this conversation all the time with parents when it comes to math. If you're homeschooling a child and they know the answer and they write the answer, they don't need to show their work. Parents get into this battle all the time with their kids. Show your work, show your work. It's arbitrary to them. Why do they have to show their work? If they can explain it to you, if they got the answer, if they know what they need to do and they can do it in their heads, why do they have to do those extra steps? Because in the future, it will be hard. Yeah, in the future, they'll do it on paper because they'll need to. So a lot of the things that happened in school when we were in school were to show that we didn't cheat, to show things because the teacher had to turn certain things in. There was a lot that gets done in a school setting that isn't necessarily about best practice for the individual child learning. There's a lot of other things going on in a school and in a classroom. So homeschooling really is this, it's all about the needs of the child and your needs, and that's not schooling. Nobody cares if you're tired or sick or hungry. Everyone's doing math now. Just do math, right? But homeschooling is completely different. So you should have a part in it, in that like you should be doing things that you enjoy doing, that you feel passionate about, that you're interested in. Your child's interest should be a part of it. It shouldn't be this separate, isolated, now we're doing school and it's miserable, but do it anyway. That's not why you homeschool. You don't homeschool to fight with your child to get them to do it. And then you might as well keep them in school and fight over homework every night. You don't really want that dynamic, and you don't have to have that dynamic. So really all that pressure has to come off. You're not going to be a classroom teacher in your home. You're going to be a facilitator of learning experiences that can take so many different forms that you should enjoy, that your child enjoys. And if it's not fun, then something needs to change. I don't mean stop homeschooling. It just means you have to take a look at what's going on and make some changes. That's all. So yeah, no, it's not 7 hours a day. It's not go be an expert in math and science and become a reading specialist. No, it's not any of that at all. And I'm not even anti-curriculum. I just think you have to see the curriculum as a guide. You can't see it as, that it's going to be perfect, because you have a unique child. So they're not a one size fits all kind of kid. So curriculum can't do it 100%. You're gonna have to. You can use it as a guide, but you're gonna have to modify, supplement, add, change, whatever. And that's a lot of what I work with parents on is, how to communicate, how to approach the planning, how to have more connection, and just make a better experience for everyone. So really, if it's not fun, it's not fun for you, stop, pause, maybe schedule a call with me, or, think about what's not going well, to then identify what kinds of changes could be made. Because really, this is your life too. It's a huge commitment that you're making, and you're not doing it to just feel tired and stressed and anxious and scared and aging too fast. These are our lives, right? We don't get this time back. So we want, you need to have peace of mind when you're homeschooling. You need to feel confident that you can handle whatever challenges come up, and you need to feel empowered to know what adjustments to make when those challenges come up. And of course you can do it, but you might not know how to do it right now. You might have to find out how to do it. And that, that's the sort of support that I offer. And I'm not the only one who, offers homeschooling support. So you just figure out who's going to give you the support that you need. But yeah, of course you can do it. If you feel like it's what your child needs, then you can. You're just going to have to adjust a bit of how you think about schooling, how you approach it, maybe how you approach your child about it, and it becomes more two colleagues sitting at a table to learn something rather than like teacher, student, do what I say, so it's a different dynamic.
That does sound a lot more fun. That sounds a lot more interesting than actually going to school now. So why do you think more parents are choosing to start homeschooling?
Well, I just think that there aren't the resources available in schools for kids who don't fit the mold. So, like you mentioned, how am I going to get this child to sit at a table for 7 hours? Well, why does a child have to sit at a table in order to learn? If a child needs to be in motion, they can learn in motion. You can jump up and down and count by fives. You can play, sight word hopscotch. There's really no reason why it has to be a certain way. But at school it does, because one adult has to manage all of these bodies, and it's called behavior management, because it really is. And so one child needing to walk around the room is going to distract all of the other kids. And then it's untenable for a teacher. How is the teacher going to get their plan done when you have all these kids distracted, talking, doing, out of their seats, doing all these other things. And the second an administrator walks by, if the kids aren't seated and working, that teacher is going to be reprimanded because it's supposed to look a certain way. The bulletin boards have to look a certain way. The classroom has to be, quiet unless they're in an activity, and then the hustle bustle is a positive sound. But, there's a lot of pressure on teachers to get everyone doing this work in this way. And there's no space then for kids who learn in a different way, who need a different explanation. So if you get done really quickly because it's easy for you and then you're bored, that's a problem. If you struggle because you don't understand it this way and you need to be shown it a different way, or you need something other than a worksheet or that type of assignment to teach you, then that's a problem too, because it's one person, it's one teacher who has to plan and do the instruction for everyone and stick to a time, especially in elementary school. In all schools, time is very important. You get a limited amount of time to do a specific activity before the kids have to do something else. So I know the stress. I was a classroom teacher for many years. I know the stress very well. It's not an easy job. And it's very difficult then to accommodate. And at the end of the day, there are these tests that they have to be prepared for. And so all of that makes it a very miserable experience. So for neurodivergent kids, there's a very high level of anxiety that goes along with that. So what's essentially happening is you're putting a child in an environment where they don't feel comfortable and safe and secure to learn, to ask questions, to have problems and express those problems. So they sit there with anxiety building up. Oh, I don't know what page we're on. And all the anxiety that they don't know what page they're supposed to be on, or they don't know how to do this problem or this thing. All that anxiety builds up, and then it gets turned into, I'm not good at this subject, or I'm too dumb to learn this thing. And it just grows and grows and grows for them in their heads. And then at a certain point, they don't want to go to school anymore. It's not a good environment. Like I said, they don't feel safe and secure and supported. And so parents then just really have to make a decision. Are you going to continue to put your child in that which doesn't support their learning? Or do you have the ability to give them a different environment? And sometimes there are alternative schools. There are other options besides homeschooling. I am a homeschooling coach, but I don't know if I'm necessarily a homeschooling advocate. I think if there's a good school setting, yeah, go for it, right? We all pay taxes, we pay for school, right? If there's a school that works, fantastic. But if there isn't, and your child can't really learn in the way that that they could in this setting, and you have the ability to give that time and focus to give them a different kind of learning, then yeah, they need it. And that's why so many parents are doing that, because the kid's not okay at school with their learning. Maybe the social stuff is too much also. And then they go to parent-teacher conferences where these experts are telling them all of the things that are wrong with their child and why it's essentially their child's fault that they are not on grade level, on reading level, getting the right test scores or all that sort of thing. And it's not. Your child is perfect. Your child is exactly who they are supposed to be at this stage in their development. They are counting on the adults to give them the learning experience that's right for them so that they can learn. There's no kid, age 4 to 18, even sometimes, college age, who knows what they need in order to learn better. It's our job. It's our job as the adults to give them. And I know that sounds really scary when it comes to learning, but it's what parents have to do all of the time. If your child is going to go play soccer, don't you have to call the coach and talk through, okay, this is my child, this is how they deal with frustration, these are some of their, the things that we're working on physically, these are some, could you please make these accommodations? If they're gonna go, have a social or a play date. I don't know how old they are, if we call them play dates anymore, right? But if they're gonna go have a play date, don't you have to bring the stuff with you the sensory toy, the snacks that they like, the all of the things that they're going to need in case they get stressed or anxious or frustrated. We have to set our kids up to succeed in so many different situations in life. And so homeschooling just becomes another one, right? If there's sensory processing. Okay, so the activity that you're going to do that day, you have to make sure that the smells are okay, the textures are okay, that, it's just the stuff that we have to do all of the time when, to parent our kids, because our kids need those things from us. So their learning becomes an extension of that. And that's why I think actually the parents are in the best position to homeschool their unique kids, because you already know all those things about them and you love them and you care the most about what happens to them. So, you can take some of the pressure off, but then, right, how are they going to do math? How are they going to learn to read? How are they, all those things. But you can't possibly know that. So you have to find out. That's all. Just like you had to find out when you became a parent to this child. You had to learn how to parent this child. So, okay, you have to learn how to homeschool this child. But that's way better because the teachers don't have the ability to learn how to teach this child. They've got too many kids, in the classroom to be able to do it. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think I did a little more than just answer, but that's really the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, because we tell parents and everyone that children learn through play 0 to 4. And then we send them to kindergarten when they're 5 or 6, and then we stop the play education and we expect structure. And really, like, how would we turn that off? You know? And then we expect these unique kids to stop their movement and sit still. And those kids probably need that movement and play activity more even than the non-unique kids, the non-high needs. Um, and why wouldn't that movement and activity and play structure help them? I mean, I understand at some point in their education, they're gonna have to sit a little bit more than, what as they get through certain grades, but particularly kindergarten, first grade, like, do we really have to sit for so many hours at a time and not get up and move around and those kinds of things? Like, I think that's really hard for kids to suddenly change to.
Yeah, it used to be play-based. Kindergarten used to be play-based. Kids used to learn how to read in first grade. And
Yeah.
again, I mean, really, I can't overstate how much high-stakes testing has changed education, right? So if the tests now are in kindergarten, then preschool is academic preschool now. They're expected to know their letters and numbers and be pre-reading. And that's why I had to start homeschooling. Academic preschool did not work for my child at all. And it was the only option available. So really, it all has to do with development. I think part of the pressure that parents feel with homeschooling is like, if my child doesn't sit still, if my child can't do something that they don't want to do, how are they going to get a job in the future? How are they going to function? How are they? And it's like, listen, it's okay because there's different stages of development, and who your child is at 5, at 12, at 17, even at 18 is not who they're going to be at 25. There's a whole bunch of development that happens. So you don't need to sit at a desk to read. You can make a nest for yourself to read and be comfortable, because reading is supposed to be enjoyable. It's not supposed to be this like, read for 15 minutes, read for 30 minutes, I'm setting the timer, you're not reading. I mean, I don't want to read like that. You don't want to read like that.
Right.
We don't want to read things that are boring and not well written. We want to read things we enjoy. We want to search for information. We want to have an experience with the text that we're reading. We don't want to do it for the sake of skill building. That's miserable. And so many kids hate reading now. And it's not just because of screens, it's because of the way that it's taught and the way that they interact with books. That it's sit and read. You must be reading, not what are you reading? What do you think? What's it like? Let's talk about it. Right? Like, it's not a positive experience for them. It's not full of connection. It's more, it feels like a reprimand. So I think that it really doesn't leave that many options. But, a great way to teach math is through Legos. It's just a fantastic way to teach math. A great way to teach math also, if you're doing sorting or division, is to like have a sort of tea party and make the food out of Play-Doh. And how many cookies is everyone going to get? Or how many, you make a cake, how many slices? I mean, it's just fun. So that's why a big thing is connection that I focus on, because you want the connection, and our kids need to feel connected to us. And that connection can take so many different forms depending on who the child is. Some of our kids don't hug us, don't say, I love you, mom. We don't get that. We get, I learned about snails. Can I tell you? And that's I love you, mom. I want to tell you what I'm thinking,
Yes.
And so being open to that and creating the space for that, which, to be honest, sitting down and doing day 11 of the curriculum doesn't always create space for that, because it doesn't let the child bring them, connect themselves to the learning. It limits what the learning is, and it doesn't give you more than one way to learn something. So it's like, here's what you're going to learn, here's how you're going to learn, and that's it. Now move on.
Right.
And it doesn't, where does the life enter in? Where does the connection? Where does the, going down a rabbit hole, black holes lead to white holes, lead to how a star is born, all those things, right? So we don't want to limit their learning at all. But yeah, that just can't do that in a classroom. You just can't. I mean, that's so unreasonable to ask one teacher who's got, 30 kids to do it. It's just, that doesn't really work. But at home, and even with more than one kid, you can create the space for kids to interact with the same topic in different ways. So you can streamline it. You don't have to you're doing that for math, you're doing that for math. Why can't you do activities that include math, science, and art, and some writing, reading and writing? Oh, you've done one activity that included 5 subjects. Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe you're done for today. Like, why can't it be a little more fun? And then it gets to higher level learning. Then it's intellectually stimulating. It goes, leaves the comprehension level of what color is her dress? Why is she going to the store? And it goes to, okay, you apply what you've learned to a brand new situation, which is the highest level of learning, with creativity, with, their ideas being expressed and all that sort of thing. So that's why I keep saying, what's the vision of homeschool? Because the vision has to be very distinct than what you remember sitting in a kindergarten classroom or a first grade classroom. What was first grade for you cannot be what first grade looks like for your homeschooler, because it's just not gonna go very well if you have a high needs kid. They have needs. Those needs have to be met in order for them to learn. If it isn't, they're not going to be able to do that. And that's what the resistance is. It's them saying, I can't do what you're asking me to do in the way you're asking me to do it at the moment you're asking me to do it. So if you get that, then okay, something has to change because this isn't working for them.
Right. Yeah. So with all that said, do you see parents having particular challenges when homeschooling their children or their unique children?
Yeah, so the number one is resistance. I didn't expect it either. I don't think any of us expect it. I think we spend a lot of love and care setting up the space, picking the curriculum, figuring out what the kids are going to do. And then when the kids say no in whatever form, I think it takes parents off guard. And I think that there's a bit of panic there, right? So I think sometimes parents take it personally and think, oh, my kid's not taking this seriously. They're not taking their learning seriously. They think homeschooling is a joke. They don't think they have to do anything. They're challenging my authority. They're testing me. They're manipulating me. All those words that we get told to look out for as parents. And really, I promise you, it's not about you. Our kids never think about us. They never, ever, ever think,
Right.
oh, how's my mom feeling today? Can I make her feel better or worse? Like, they just think about themselves, because that's their development. And that's all stages of their development for the 18, plus years that we have them in our lives. They think about themselves. So it's not personal. They really are. Resistance is behavior. Behavior is communication. All behavior is communication. They are saying, I cannot do what you're asking me to do in the way you're asking me to do it at the moment you're asking me to do it. And so that resistance really becomes, for so many families, it turns into power struggles, it turns into conflicts.
Yeah.
And for high needs kids, that can mean explosions, tantrums, meltdowns. In my case, it meant, when I didn't understand that resistance and what was behind it, it took me a little while to figure that out. And that's why I became a coach, because I'm like, oh, right, how's anyone else supposed to figure this out? Let me help. But it would be physical aggression. I would get kicked, or the paper would be ripped and torn and thrown, and a lot of slammed doors and screaming. But there's also the very quiet resistance of, I'm tired, putting the head on the desk. And we all did that in school too. I don't know if you remember, I would sharpen my pencil all of the time. I always needed a tissue, right? Any excuse to get out of work. So, but we see it as that in a classroom, and at home, they're not trying to get out of doing it. They're not able to do it. So that's where you really have to expect that the curriculum's not going to be a perfect fit, that you're going to have to get in there and make some changes, and then figure out what kind of learning experiences work really well for your child, and how to create as much meaning and connection and purpose. Because neurodivergent kids won't do arbitrary things. They can't. Put your shoes on. Why? Because I said so. Yeah, try that. It doesn't work.
Okay.
So a worksheet where, do these 16 problems, it's arbitrary. Why do they have to do 16? Why do they have to even do one? Maybe it doesn't make sense because the numbers are written on the paper. Maybe they need to feel the numbers. What is the number 5? It's not just, can you write the number 5, but what is 5? Right? They have to actually really understand on a deeper level. They can't just repeat and memorize and understand it that way. So that's why it becomes a little more challenging, because there's all kinds of, and we could say this is best practice, right? What high needs, what neurodivergent kids need, I would say is best practice. They need the best communication from us. They need the best approaches to learning. And really, I think all kids need that, but there's a ton of kids that are okay going with the flow, doing what's asked of them.
Yes.
And I'm always shocked, right? When my friends ask their kids to put their shoes on, they go and put their shoes on. I'm like, how? How is that possible? Who does that? That's amazing. So that's just, I think resistance is the big challenge. I mentioned before triggers. If your kid has any sort of sensory thing, but also triggers from school. If they've been in school, they probably have some trauma or some really, negative ideas about themselves and their abilities to do certain things. And that's not going to go away just because you've homeschooled. They're going to carry it with them. If someone looked at their drawing and said how awful it was, if they're a child or an adult who said it, it doesn't really matter. In that moment, your child may be convinced that they can't do art, that they're awful at art. So then when you say, hey, let's do this art thing, they're going to have that anxiety and that pressure and that stress. And you might not know that, because you might not know that someone one day said, oh, that's ugly. And you didn't know that that's how they felt about art. So, our kids keep a lot of stuff inside them. So you might be surprised at what comes out once you start schooling, which is why sometimes people take a period of time to sort of de-school, it's called, and just not go straight into homeschooling, but just spend some time doing, other kinds of activities where there's learning, but it's not exactly straight up skills based. Here's a topic we're doing. So it's more like playing, reading together, hanging out. And so parents can sort of learn how their child, what times of day does your child have more energy, learn best? Where do they like to read? What do they like to read? What do they like to do? A craft or Legos or draw or, right? And sometimes it's video games and sometimes it isn't, but there's also ways to use, Minecraft for learning. And I'm not a huge video game fan, but there are some kids who, it's so important to them. So you can use it for their learning rather than make it just a reward. It can be a reward, but you can also if you incorporate the things they love into their learning, they're gonna wanna do it. So you can use all this stuff too, if you know how to sort of set that up. So that's, those are, I think, some of the real challenges. I think resistance is the number one. And, parents not expecting the kids to say no, because you're not really supposed to say no in school. And your
Right.
child will say no, and they'll say no loudly. And they'll keep saying no until it's something that they can do in a way they can do it. So that's just expect that. So the power struggles and all of that, it takes two people to have a power struggle, is what I'll say. So maybe, a new approach to communication might be time to figure that out also, because if it turns into conflicts and things like that, nobody wants that when it comes to their learning. It doesn't feel good for you also. It's awful. We know how it feels to yell, to get upset. If that's a part of homeschooling, that feels awful for everybody. So yeah, I would say, expect that it can go down that path very quickly. And there's ways, there's things to do about it, and there's ways to avoid that.
Okay. Just because you brought it up a little bit off topic, do you discuss deschooling? Right? Is that
Yeah, yeah. I actually, I even have a video that I made about it. I think deschooling is actually really important. I think if you're going to homeschool your child, you need to give them that separation. They have to kind of recover from school because if it wasn't a good experience for them, if they were in a play-based preschool and now you're going to homeschool, well, I don't know if you have to deschool, but if you're talking about a child who did, it was very negative for them. So sometimes it means, I think, like I said, you really need that information. You need to just have a chance to hang out with your kid and know, like, what are they really into? What do they think? What do they like? Why do they like it? And, really understand what their rhythms are. So it always changes. It always changes. But like, there's a joke in the homeschooling community. There's breakfast and there's second breakfast. But like having food available all of the time really matters because you want them to have a consistent energy level. So they need to keep eating. So like, what do they like to eat? What kinds of stuff? You're going to be around your kid more than you were. I mean, maybe in the summer you're around your kid all the time, but if you're going to be around your kid that much, well, okay, what is breakfast? Then what is, the snack? How many snacks? What kinds of food? When do they need energy? Maybe they need a smoothie. I mean, there's a lot of food prep and dishes. I think that's the hardest part of homeschooling, to be honest, just like the constant need to eat and drink. So that's really something to, begin to think about. And for yourself, right? When you get hungry, you get crabby. You're not going to be patient and supportive and kind. You're going to be annoyed and frustrated and impatient. So how do you make sure you get what you need, that you're drinking the water, the coffee, the whatever you need, that you get breakfast, that you don't just go right into it because your kid's excited and ready to go. So really making sure that those needs are being met and then figuring out, here's how much my kid needs to move. Like just watching them because they give themselves what they need in terms of movement, the activities they like to do. So you can kind of just observe that. And then also, if there are things like, for example, for my child, at age 3 at school, they were having the kids write letters and learning how to write words. And just if you keep in mind how small those hands are, how undeveloped the muscles are, how undeveloped the bones are, that was like torture for my child. And it was a horrible experience. And so writing was something that they weren't going to do. And I had to back off. I mean, at age, I think we started homeschooling at age 4. Yeah, we didn't do writing with a pencil. We did, writing with a stick in the dirt, with chalk. There's other ways to do it. But the actual take a pencil, write on the paper with the spacing in the line, I had to back off for a very long time about that. So that's a part of deschooling also, is you don't want to repeat I mean, I don't use the word trauma lightly. It is quite traumatizing for kids when they're put in these situations. So you don't want to trigger that. If you do trigger that, they're not just going to keep learning to push through. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to build up their ability to do it in other ways to then go back to it later. So it's not that you set it aside and that's it. Like for writing, it's not that my child never ever did anything again. It was, okay, let's switch to modeling clay, like, plasticine, which is harder, and build up those muscles. And, let's do a lot of drawing, which is using a pencil and drawing lines and the fine motor skills. But I didn't say write the alphabet, because I knew that was going to get a very, that was going to trigger my child. So we went around it. We did other things to prepare them. So then when it was time to go back to writing, and I would keep testing it, but then my child was able to do it in a very different way where it felt different. It didn't feel the same as when they were 3 being forced to do it. So that's a really important part of deschooling also. So sometimes it's a few days, a few weeks for certain things, like in my case for writing for my child, it was, I think it was like a couple of years. So again, it wasn't that there were no letters or, no pencils or anything like that. It was just going about it in a very different way. So that's where deschooling, I think, becomes really important, because if it's all about them as an individual, you have to really know them. How do they think? What's their sense of humor? What are they interested in? That's their favorite show. Why is that their favorite show? What kind of books do they like to read? So going to the library and letting them choose whatever books and kind of taking note, like you just get to become a detective. Who is this person that you're going to hang out with? And what do you have in common? What do you both like? Great, that's stuff you can focus on, and from there you can begin to then figure out what homeschooling can look like.
That's pretty cool. That's something I wasn't really clear on. I see a lot of people online talk about deschooling, but I really wasn't sure what it was, or um, how it came into play, or how it was relevant to anything. So that's really helpful information, and I'm glad that that's cleared up. Yeah. So, is there anything else you would like to tell us, or anything else that would help with homeschooling unique kids?
I think just to kind of repeat, there's no one size fits all. What's working really great for that family might not work well for you, and what works really well for your family might seem awful to other people. Okay. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you really have to kind of like tune out what other people are doing
Yes.
and what kind of criticisms and judgments other people might have of what you're doing. You're going to do what works for you and what works for your kids and what helps them engage in their learning and thrive. And so, if the kids are upside down on the couch reading, okay, like why does it
Yeah.
just doesn't matter, right? They could still work in a cubicle 10 years, 15 years from now. It doesn't mean they're not going to be able to sit at a desk. It just means for right now, they are free to express themselves, right? So again, homeschooling is really the celebration of the individual. It's the validation, the respecting, and the celebrating of the individual as the individual. It is the opposite of school, okay? So that's really important to remember and keep in mind. And then I will just tell you, there will be challenges. It's not going to go how you think, but it can go how you desire it to go. So that's what you have to remember. How it is now is not how it has to be. And I think because we struggle so much with parenting our unique kids, we then expect that homeschooling is a struggle. Well, right, because I struggle with this child. But you don't have to struggle with this child. It doesn't have to be a struggle. Parenting and homeschooling your child does not have to be a struggle at all. It really doesn't. So I just want to say every problem has a solution. So if the way that something is happening has created a dynamic, and then the dynamic takes on a life of its own, you say do math, they say no, they storm off, you feel powerless, you feel out of control, then maybe, you assert your power as parent to take things away or whatever, and then, we all know how that goes. It's such a common part of parenting, but it doesn't actually have to be that way. There are other things that can be done instead, and it's okay if you don't know them yet. There's nothing wrong with, you haven't failed if you don't know it. It just means that you haven't learned it yet. And then once you know it forever. So all the dynamics, all the struggles, all the challenges, there's a way to handle them, to overcome them, and to homeschool and parent without them. And it's really important that you know that, because nobody should feel stuck. Nobody should feel trapped. Once you start to homeschool, then you might feel like, well, school's not an option and this is miserable and I'm stuck doing it. And that feels really bad. So you're not failing. You are the right person to do this. You just haven't figured it out yet, and you absolutely don't have to be on your own to figure it out. It's not sink or swim. So there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of support, and all the time I have free calls, free consultation calls with parents, and we don't end up working together. But I can help them just go on the right path, because not everyone needs exactly what I do. And that's okay, but we get to talk through what's happening and what action they can take, right? Get an action plan together so that they are not just floundering. So that's all. Like, really, this has to work for you also. If it doesn't work for you, I promise you it's not working very well for your kids, because you're the most important part of that equation, right? You have to feel good about things, you have to sleep, you have to have peace of mind, you have to enjoy your day. Maybe not every second of every day of homeschooling and parenting, but overall, your smile, your laughter matters, your happiness matters in this a lot. Okay, so those are my final thoughts, final reminders. Write it on the wall or post somewhere.
Yes.
Remind yourself all of the time. If day after day this is a struggle and this doesn't feel good, okay, stop. Some changes need to be made. Okay,
And I think a lot of that really applies to parenting unique and high needs children overall, because we have to learn about our child and their needs specifically and apply things to them in a way that works for them. Like like you said, we can't do it the way the neighbor does or the way the other kid does. And every unique child is not like every unique child. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I know they say that about autism. One autistic person. They are not all the same. And it's a huge spectrum, which I think confuses people. So just because you know one person on one point in the spectrum does not mean anyone else you'll meet will be anything like them. So it's really the same, homeschooling or parenting. You really have to understand their needs, their quirks, their their unique differences, and rather than fight against those, you have to learn to either flow with or counter in an appropriate way that works for your child, not against them. And I think that can be the hard part, because we're coming from a point where parenting was different, and it doesn't, just like you said with school, we used to go to school in one way, and homeschooling doesn't have to be that way, and parenting is kind of the same. We can't parent these unique kids the same way as the non-unique kids, or the way our parents parented, and so on and so forth. So I think all of that information is amazing. And now my head is like, oh, homeschooling. That doesn't sound quite as scary as I thought it did. Um, so that's awesome. I love it all. And I can't wait to dig in and maybe learn a little bit more about that. So if you can let us know where to find you and any other important information about you and your business, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So mlccoaching.com is my website, and there's a big button there for a free consultation call. And like I said, any questions, concerns, anything, schedule a call and we can talk about it. I work with parents one-on-one or in a group coaching program, and I show everyone what I call a CPC method, which I developed. It's Communicate, Plan, Connect. Because like you said, the communication piece is so important. But even with perfect communication, if the assignment is not developmentally appropriate, it's still, your kid still can't do it. So there really has to be an eye on how do you plan for your child's unique needs. And so that's, we work on that and how to approach that. And then you get the connection. So instead of conflict, you get collaboration and connection. No more power struggle. We get rid of power struggles right away. You can't do anything with power struggles, right? So we've got to get rid of those. So that's what I do. So one-on-one group coaching. I do have some, self-study things as well, but I think it helps to actually have more support, because it's so hyper personalized. Like the way that you said it has to be about this child and their needs. Well, I feel like that about you, about my clients. It has to be about your needs, your comfort levels, your interests, how you exist in the world, and so you can then do that for your kids. So I'm available. Really, I think the starting point is the free consultation call, and then we can figure out what's going on, what you need, how you desire homeschooling to be, and how to get you there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I think this information is really going to help a lot of people understand what their options are, if nothing else, because I think a lot of us feel stuck and we don't have to be stuck. And I think that's fantastic. So I thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching Parenting High Needs Children on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next episode.